Welcome back, grade 12s. Yes, I'm Ashraf Patel doing the accounting lesson for today. Now, we're starting with asset disposal. Do I see people already going into panic mode? Don't fear when Ashraf is near. Watch exactly how we're going to go about answering the section on asset disposal. When we are disposing of an asset, remember, it can take place either during the financial year or you can dispose of the asset at the end of the financial year. So, a disposal could take place at any time. You must be in a situation to handle it no matter when it takes place. Now, what are the steps that we need to follow when recording the disposal of a fixed asset? And this is very, very important. If you can identify your steps correctly, then I promise you asset disposal will be a piece of cake, chocolate cake. Here goes. Step number 1, calculate and record the depreciation of the asset that you are selling. Now, obviously, this does not apply if the asset was sold at the beginning of the year because you didn't use the asset in that year. But the moment it's somewhere in the year or even at the end of the year, calculate the depreciation on the sold asset for when? For the year under review. Double entry, debit depreciation. Why? Imputed expense, decreasing the equity, therefore debited. And a credit to accumulated depreciation. Old hat, you've done this entry many a times, so you know exactly how to go about doing that. All right, okay, step number 2. Transfer the asset that you are selling to the asset disposal account. Now remember, a very, very important consideration. Always use the cost price of your asset. Okay, what's my entry? Here goes. A debit to asset disposal. You're debiting it. Why? Because it's an interim nominal account. It's going to serve a purpose. And once that purpose is served, we're going to close the account. It's going to self-destruct. So a debit to asset disposal, yes. And a credit to the asset account. Now a question arises. Why do we credit the asset account? Because obviously the asset account is decreasing in value, therefore credited, and a debit to your asset disposal account. Got that? Brilliant. Step number 3. Transfer the accumulated depreciation on the asset to the asset disposal account. Same way. Now remember, where the asset is taken to, you also have to transfer the negative component. What did we say asset disposal is? Remember, an interim nominal account. And what did we say accumulated depreciation is? It's a negative asset. So therefore, if you are transferring the cost price of that asset, you also have to transfer the accumulated depreciation. That's right. And here goes. What's my entry? Remember, the accumulated depreciation is equal to your accumulated depreciation at the beginning of the year on that asset, plus the depreciation that we calculated in step 1. Very important. So your accumulated depreciation will have 2 components to it. Balance at the beginning of the year plus the pro rata depreciation for the current year. And therefore my double entry is a debit to accumulated depreciation. Why? Because you want to reduce a negative asset. A negative asset has a credit balance. To reduce it, I debit it. Got that? So a debit to my accumulated depreciation and a credit to my asset disposal account. Okay, let's carry on. Step number 4. Record the sale or the disposal of the asset using the selling price now or the price obtained for the asset. In other words, what was the asset disposed for? Okay, and here, what are we going to do? If the asset is sold for cash, we debit bank and credit asset disposal. If it isn't credit, we debit the debtors control and credit asset disposal. Notice in each case, the debit changes, the credit remains the same. If it's a trade-in, we debit the creditors control and credit asset disposal. Now we come to step number 5. What are we going to be doing here? Determine whether there's a profit or loss on the disposal of the asset. And how do we do that? If my selling price is greater than the carrying value, then I've made a profit on sale of asset. And I would debit my asset disposal and credit my profit on sale of asset. If my selling price is less than the carrying value, then I would make a loss on sale of asset. In that case, I would debit the loss on sale of asset and credit my asset disposal. So therefore, depreciation on the remainder of the fixed asset should be calculated depending on the information that is provided to you. So we've done important work in this segment. Make sure you understand it. Stay with us. We'll be back with you in just a while.